Good evening and welcome to the digital launch of Niyogi Books' latest fiction offering, Mandu, The Romance of Roopmati and Baz Bahadur by Malathi Ramachandran. Niyogi Books, as we all know, is an independent press pioneering in quality illustrated books. Over the last few years, they have introduced four imprints: Olive Turtle for original fiction in English, Thornbird for translations, Paper Missile for non-fiction, and Bahuvachan for illustrated Hindi books. Mandu is an olive turtle imprint. Set in 16th century India, this novel is inspired by the legend of the last sultan of Malwa, Baz Bahadur, and the beautiful peasant girl Roopmati, where on one hand love blooms with a common passion of music, on the other Akbar's invasion spells impending doom. Not divulging any further, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Malathi Ramachandran is the author of three novels. This is a fourth. A master's in mass communication, she dabbled with writing middle speeches and travelogues before finding her forte in fiction. Her short stories have been published in magazines and anthologies. Her passion for the history and cultural heritage of the country takes her to little known towns and hamlets where she finds stories to share. Malti's last book in this genre, The Legend of Kuldhara, recreates the story of an abandoned village in Rajasthan and was also published by Niyogi Books. In conversation with her would be Anukriti Upadhyay, a bilingual writer of two novellas in English, Dora and Bhauri, from HarperCollins, and a short story collection in Hindi, Japani Sarai, from Rajkamal and Sons, published last year. Her new novel, Kintsugi, has just been released. In her other life, she is a law and finance professional and conservation enthusiast. Without further ado, I'm handing over the space to Anukriti to begin.
Thank you, Mansi. And thank you, Niyogi Books, for giving me this opportunity. I welcome Malathi Ramachandran to this platform of Niyogi Books for our conversation today. Fiction that is written at the cusp of history and folk tales holds a special fascination, a unique fascination entirely its own. And the author who chooses to write such fiction has very interesting material at her hands. Because what history omits, folktale supplies, and there is scope for the author's own creativity to fill the gaps or embroider upon details just as she wishes. It is also a genre which TV and movies and other popular culture has found of interest and has explored. This is the book that I have the honor and privilege of launching today. Is titled Mandu, The Romance of Roopmati and Baz Bahadur. It's a historical romance written by Malathi Ramachandran, who's here with us. I'm sure this retelling of the legendary love story of the two briefly happy but in the end tragic lovers, Roopmati and Baz Bahadur, will find its place with discerning readers. I congratulate Malathi for writing this very engrossing book, and Trisha and Niyogi Books for publishing it. So with this, I launched the book formally, and I would like to invite Malathi for a brief conversation on the conception, evolution of this very interesting saga that she penned, and other things related to the writing process and the characters with which the book deals. Welcome, Malathi.
Thank you, Anukriti, and I'm delighted to be here in conversation with you today. And thank you, Trisha and Mansi, for having me here today. Thank you.
So before we start, is there anything that you want to say, or would you, should we just have this free-flowing conversation and discuss the book?
Yeah, let's just discuss the book.
Okay, that's great. So first of all, let me congratulate you again on this book. Writing is such a time-consuming and solitary occupation that once a book is conceived till the time it is out before the readers, only the writer knows what they go through in the entire process of bringing a creation to public view. So it's a big achievement, and I'm very happy that it was made possible by your efforts and also by Niyogi Books. I was, when I was reading Mandu, and that has always been my curiosity when I've read other historical fiction. To me, it seems that historical facts or books based on historical events, they have the potential of constraining one's creativity because there's a certain set of facts which are there and which you cannot really alter because that is handed down by history. But at the same time, those same constraints also provide you with a framework to hang the story on. So it's it's both. It can hold you back at the same time. It gives you structure. And this is the time of digital love and disposable romances, and here's the story of two star-crossed lovers who met in come from very disparate social backgrounds and who meet, and their love has a slow charm till the tragic end. So tell me, what made you choose to write a historical romance of this sort?
Okay, so history has always fascinated me. And we do a lot of travel within the country and outside. And within India, we do make it a point to go off the beaten track so that we can find those little stories hidden away among the monuments and the ruins. And that really fascinates me. So when we had gone to Mandu, it was just a normal trip that we had made. It was a Madhya Pradesh round that we did of Maheshwar and Mandu, Ujjain and Indore, just one of those touristy things. But then when we went to Mandu, I realized this is something totally different. And we spent a whole day there. We did a walking tour of about 4 to 5 hours. And it was beautiful because we had a very nice guide. We were really lucky to get a guide who was certified, experienced, and he was one of the best. And he took us through the monuments. He actually took us on a journey of the centuries, as well as of the monuments, all over the fort city of Mandu, and told us the story of Mandu right from the time of the Parmar kings. And when he came to the story of Sultan Baz Bahadur and Roopmati, it was absolutely riveting. And he showed us the buildings and the Baz Palace and Roopmati's Mahal and all those, the Jahaz Mahal. So it was very beautiful and it had a lot of atmosphere. So I was quite fascinated. So when I came back, I was thinking about it a lot. Then I thought, behind history, there's always little stories, and this one seems to be so interesting. So I decided to write about it. But like you say, writing historical fiction is a double-edged sword. One side you have a constraint, and the other side you're happy to have something, like you say, to hang it on. But in my case, I was actually lucky because there was literally just 2 lines of history attached to Baz and Roopmati. So I had a lot of space to play around with my characters, my imagination. And there was just 2 lines, as I said. The first one says that he was a sultan and she was a peasant girl. And then they both met, and because of their love of music, they bonded, they fell in love. And the second important point here is that Akbar, when he was collecting the best of artists for his own Mughal court, he decided to come and take her away to his court. So, and then it says it's a tragic ending. So with these very, very bare facts, it was just like skeletal facts that I had. I was able to build a story and a plot and characters with more of freedom.
That's very interesting because the book deals with characters which do not come from history, entirely from your imagination, whether it's the chief wife of Baz Bahadur or her mother, the traditional vamp role, the loyal servants. There are so many characters which all seem to have a lot of life, and they are not unidimensional. They have personalities in each of them. So that is, that I think is a really interesting part of writing, where you can hew characters out of facts. You add your own
imagination.
And still stay true to the place you've chosen to write about and the historical underpinning to it. The other interesting thing I find about Baz and Roopmati stories, it's kind of a template that we have, right? Whether it's Ratan Sen, Padmavati, the same kind of template, two lovers and a third more powerful ruler intervening. And there are any number of these stories that keep sort of repeating. So there's some reason, there is a fascination that that exists in the minds of people for these
Yes.
kind of romantic stories. They're rooted in our folk culture. We there might be two lines of history, but there is so many stories told by people about them. So in the oral tradition, as we call it, the folk tradition, um, and that's the other aspect of this very interesting book, that on one hand it's deriving its basis from history, from those few lines of history, and on the other hand a very deep and rich folk tradition. We've all heard about magical malwa, subhe banaras, shame awadh, and shabe malwa. They were legendary in those times. So you brought all that atmosphere. The Shabe Malwa is alive in your book. The night of Mandu always starts with lamps being lit, and the entire place coming alive with sounds of music and revelry. Um, is that is that from your also understanding of the folk tradition in relation to Baz and Roopmati story? Because I have heard the oral tradition in this regard, and do you draw upon that for for
Um,
in novel?
Uh, not really, because this probably would be in the songs of Malwa, the folk songs of Malwa. They might have mentioned it, but I was not privy to those, and I've not really heard what they had to say in those songs. They just sang of the beauty and the virtue of Rupmati. So I would say these were purely from my imagination, because I just wanted to create a magical world in Mandu. And so it was not really from the folk tradition. But having said that, I would say that the folk tradition of our country is very, very, very old and does need to be documented even today. Because, like the Panchatantras and the Jataka tales, they go back as far back as the third century BC, and they have been documented and written down in Sanskrit and the Pali language. And today, because of the English language, having taken it up, and we have it in English also, we are all able to read it. Same way, I feel that history is incomplete without these folk tales. It sort of provides the third dimension to history. So for me, the story of Roopmati and Baz Bahadur would be an aspect of the history of Malwa. It would be the finishing the finishing touch to it.
That's that's an interesting that's an interesting point you make. Actually, folk traditions have both elements of history as well as imagination, just like the work of fiction that we, both you and I sort of dabble into. So the, the folk tradition combines what happened. Also, it gives an opportunity to people to imagine what could have happened or what may have happened, or
True.
provide an opportunity for a resolution, which history often leaves out. There is, either a gap in what happened or an unsatisfactory resolution. So I think that's where the oral tradition steps in. Um,
Exactly.
and I come from Rajasthan, and we have a very strong oral folk tradition, which goes back ages, and has, though the tradition is mainly owned, so to speak, by men, the singers of the folk tradition are men, but the stories are sort of safeguarded. They are told and retold by women. So
Mhm.
that's an interesting aspect of folk tradition, which resonates deeply with women writing fiction too. We always did that. Our ancestors did that. There was the sisterhood sitting around telling each other these stories.
Yes.
Um, and it is true for all countries. I'm a
Mhm.
Japanese, and I keep reading Japanese literature. The richest period of Japanese art and literature was the Heian period. All we know about Heian period comes from books written by two women,
Okay.
where politics and governance and economics has always been male dominated, and it's true for
Yes.
our country too. So when you were choosing Roopmati and Baz to write about, one aspect was because you went there and the story fascinated you. Was there also an element of the story being in many ways like really woman centric? Though Baz is the hero, the soul of the story is Roopmati. She's the one who, at least to me, it felt that she's the one who brings the magic and the um, there's no other way of putting it, but just the romance of the story comes more from Roopmati's um, character, which is at the same time stubborn and docile. It's a very interesting character. It has got shades to it. On one hand, she completely refuses the sultan and says, "I don't want to go with you." But on the other hand, um, she when she gives her word, then she's led docilely by the sultan to his palace. So was it Rupi that attracted you more, or was it Baz?
I think it was the story. It was the story
Uh-huh.
itself because it's got such a sort of tragic, I don't know what to say, tragic poetry to the whole thing. That just when everything was so perfect, it's the fact that an invading army could sort of put their lives asunder. So I thought it was the story itself which was very attractive to me. But having said that, Rupmati's character, it comes from very from the medieval times, and yes, she was a little I mean, she would have been a person who would have been very docile, and probably that's why her life was controlled and sort of, she couldn't do anything about her circumstances. But I have tried to give it a different spin. I have created a character of Roopmati. Like you said, she's determined also. She is stubborn when she wants to be. She has her principles, and she's not just going to let the men toss her around. So she has her way of looking at, even at the end when Adam Khan comes in, she has her own idea of what she would like to do with herself. So these are things that I have introduced. And in this story, in spite of having two women, Hiba, the first Begum of Sultan, and Rupmati, both of them being in such circumstances that they're actually weak. They are shown as weak, but they both come stronger at the end of the story. So I would like to say that within the framework of the patriarchal system, I would like to make my characters always come out stronger at the end.
That's that's when I was reading the book, yes, that I did notice that as well. The fact remains that treatment of women characters in folk tales and history always poses challenges, especially for a woman writer. They always because the stories are from the past, the characters are from the past, they can conform to a past set of mores and
Set of
rules.
modes. Yes.
But we look at them from our place where we stand now, what we have gained over all these centuries, the tough fights that our predecessors have fought, and the privileges that they have secured for women like you and I. Um,
Yes.
we look back, it just seems problematic that a sultan can decide the fate of an independent woman, or that a wife's position is really marginal in the household of a royal husband, and also marginal in every other way. So that is that is a challenge that one has to, I guess, you come to terms with while writing a book like that. Same, it it all converges, I guess. The folk and the history traditions converge when they deal with women. They are always these unidimensional figures, right from say Sita's character to Shakuntala, to any of the traditional heroines that we've seen. um,
So I
the
think, Anukriti, I think it's all about how we treat the character, because though they did belong to the times when, they were suppressed, oppressed, and
yeah,
repressed. But the thing is that it's how we treat the character. As a writer, as you say, we are emancipated women, and we can,
yes.
decide how we want the character to go. So I have made sure that my character is not weak at the end of the day. She does have a mind of her own, and within the framework of the patriarchal system, she does do what she wants to do. And this was the same thing I did in Kuldhara also. We had two women characters who were extremely tossed around by the men, if you want to say that. And they were at the mercy of the men in their lives. But towards the end, both of them come out stronger. And that, I think, is what the story is all about, women going from weakness to strength.
And also the shades, because the traditional roles of women were very black and white. They are either the pure woman, the conception of the pure woman, or the conception of the controlling, dominant, or corrupt woman. So from the book, except for Jana Begum, whom you can excuse because she's doing it out of maternal love. That is also also when I think about Jana Begum, you can only play with the cards you've been dealt. So women were dealt a poor hand all through, and if they chose to then be manipulative or secretive or treacherous as Jana Begum was, you can see why, because that's the hand they were dealt, and you have to find a way to stay ahead with those in those circumstances. So I actually did not find myself out of sympathy with any of the women characters. I found sort of nodding along. Yeah, I can see that happening. Yeah, I can see that to be the reality of those times, despite being not too happy with the way Baz just got away very lightly with all his shenanigans. You seem to have been kind to him, as is I think also that's natural because it's a romance and the hero of the romance is allowed rather a broad leeway. But what are your thoughts on Baz? As a
When you say he got away easily, are you talking about the end or are you talking about the whole process of the story?
I just think that Baz got the best of the both worlds. Though, I will also mention that you brought in the psychological element, but I want you to elaborate on that when you come back on this. So I don't want to. I want you to speak about that. The psychological element that you injected very deftly in his character. But in the whole story, Baz is the only one um, who has his cake and eats it too.
I totally disagree. I don't agree with you at all. I think I don't want to give the ending away for those who don't know it, but I really don't think he got away so easily as you say, because it's all about his mental state. It's not just being physically getting away with something, getting away scot-free with your physical self safe, but I think he's emotionally very, very, very scarred at the end of the story. So I think he didn't get away with anything. But as far as the psychological sort of the aspect of his character, I had brought it in because to be very honest, history is not kind to him. History has not been kind to him, but as the creator of this story, I have to be kind to him. So I could not let my reader feel that Baz did something, unforgivable. So therefore, I have been kind to him, and I have made it. I have created this thing in his character where he did not like how he had behaved, what he had done. I wouldn't go into the details, but what he had done, he was not happy with himself, and he had to do it as he justified to himself. He said, "I have to do it because there was no other way to handle the situation." So yes, I think I was kind to him, but I don't think history has let him get away with anything.
That's true. Also, we go back to the same point about judging, judging 16th century with 21st century morals.
Comparing,
so, yeah, the feudal system was what it was. That was the same system where about which the Chanakya Kautilya Niti says that the children of a king are like woodflings, and the king should just kill them in order to not be challenged or not be harmed by them. So there is the whole construct of feudalism was based on these kind of
survival of the fittest. Survival of the
exactly.
fittest. That was it.
Yeah.
And the man
Yeah.
who made it finally was supposed to be the strongest, so that's what the kingdom deserved, I guess. So yeah, that
Yes.
was how they looked at it.
Yeah.
True.
I think I think the book portrays really Baz as the ideal romantic hero, and um, it succeeds in righting the wrong of history. As you said, history hasn't been kind to Baz Bahadur. It hasn't been kind to many rulers because because of the things they did, and also the things that they did not do for their people and for their for the kingdoms they were responsible for. So, but you really corrected that
Yeah,
very.
and yeah. While you say he's the perfect romantic hero, but I have ensured that he has certain, faults, certain points which a lot of people won't like. So I've given him a lot of weaknesses too. So he's not really the perfect hero, but he's a human hero. I would feel he's a very human sultan, and not a one of those swashbuckling people who would just sort of rush through everything and take whatever comes in their way. So he would be a more human sultan, I think, of those days.
Yeah, that's true. So therefore, he's not a royal figure, but he's a romantic hero who has his vulnerabilities, and
Yes,
he tries to hide them. He tries to deal with them away from away from help, or has no one really to rely upon. That's the tragic romantic hero figure with whom
exactly.
instinctively sympathizes, because you feel um, you feel protective about a character who's so beleaguered,
Yeah,
has very real affection in his life, and is completely thrown on his own resources to determine what's right and wrong. And he has an inner compass of his own. He has a moral compass. He knows
yes,
right what's wrong. And yet, being human and having human weaknesses, he ventures into paths which inside of him he knows are not right. So so that's what I meant when I said I think he's a perfect romantic hero. So
true.
besides Roopmati and Baz, who really sort of the two larger than life characters in this novel, which other character did you really enjoy writing? One. And two, the second and related question is, when you the one thing that always a lot of readers want to know is, when you write about a character, do you want us to like them? Are you like trying to make a likable character, or are you just being honest with the character that you've conceived in your mind, and this is the way the character he or she is, and there it is. You decide whether you like them or not. So on
Yeah.
both.
So what I do is, my protagonists have to be likable. Whatever their faults, whatever they may do, I want them to linger in the mind of, like, I'm sure everyone remembers, all of us who've read Gone with the Wind as youngsters. We've all read it, and we all had a sort of longing and yearning for Rhett Butler, because he was the most likable character in spite of all his faults. So I feel any character, protagonist should be very, very likable, and the women should fall in love with him. That is very important in a book, so that he lingers on in the mind. That's very important. But as far as the other characters are concerned, it's take it or leave it, because I've just presented them, and they have to play a role in moving the plot forward. So each of my characters, whether it is Sadia or Hiba or it is Jana, whoever they are, they all have to just move the plot forward. So I have tried to make them as rounded as I can, but actually it's not possible, because you can't have all characters, rounded off in a novel. It's not exactly possible. So I've tried to make them as rounded as possible. And so if people like them, they like them. But personally, I really liked Sadia. That she was a favorite of mine, because she was so so full of love and yet so full of, I mean, she's a little fighter and she fights for everything and she gets her way and she's all the time, guiding her mistress. And I somehow loved her character. As I was making it, I felt I really liked her. So she was a favorite supporting character. But as far as Hiba is concerned, I'd like to say this, that Hiba, being the first wife in the story of Sultan Baz Bahadur, Hiba starts off extremely weak. She's trying to learn music, which she doesn't care for. She tries to do all sorts of things so that she can just catch Baz's attention. She's extremely weak in the beginning, but I'm very happy with the way she develops in the story. And towards the end, she is stronger than anyone else. So that is one thing I'm very happy with the character of Hiba.
Yeah, that's interesting. The way Hiba, within the constraints of a royal existence, which was pretty constraining for women, it meant all kinds of freedom for men, and it meant all kinds of restrictions for women. So within those, the way she managed to, with the help of, and it's interesting, with the help of her maids and
Mates.
serve her. So the women who were in a subordinate condition, who belonged to a lower class,
They
with
become
the,
her support systems.
yeah, and she finds a modicum of independence. You can criticize that independence. You can say that it was not really independence; it was debauchery, or it was, it was really descending to the basest of human existence. But in her circumstance, where she is she's not permitted any expression of her own self. On one hand is this husband who has no place for her in his life, and on the other hand is this very dominant mother who,
Mother.
yeah, which is, the mother is actually the overshadowing presence in Hiba's life, and she more than Baz actually warps her character.
True.
That's how it feels to me.
Yeah. So, but while you say that her path was debauchery, yeah, that's true. But then, is it really important what the path is, as long as a woman frees herself from what has been shackling her down? And what has been shackling her down is her need for Baz. She's constantly asking for his attention. And if she can feel she's independent of him and she at last doesn't need a man in her life to complete herself, I think that is freedom. Doesn't matter what the path is. So, and like you say, within the restraints of Mandu city, what else can she do? What else could she have done to free herself? So there are very restrictive circumstances there, and she has managed to find her own, what she would like to be and how she'd like to be. So I personally liked her freedom that she achieves at the end of the book.
Yeah, it was an interesting turn you gave to her character. Though I don't agree with that, with what you said, that it doesn't matter what the path is. I think path is almost as important as the destination itself, or the attainment of freedom itself. But it's a more philosophical sort of debate.
True.
But I do agree that
Yeah.
circumstances for women have not been conducive for a healthy growth, or
Hmm.
of a healthy expression of their personalities. So in that circumstance, if you do not give enough sunlight,
Hmm.
or enough resources to a plant, it's bound to grow in whichever direction it gets its
It,
nourishment
true.
from. So
Very
it's
true.
yeah. So I found it an interesting turn to Hiba's character. Um, I see that we have only a few minutes left, and I was wondering whether you would read an excerpt from Mandu, for all of us, so that
Uh,
people get a taste of the book
okay,
itself.
okay. I'll just pick up the book.
Sure.
Uh, I would like to actually read the epilogue. Do you think that would be all right? Because the
I think
epilogue sets the mood with which the reader would leave the story. So I'm just going to read the epilogue. When Basant Ritu comes to Malwa, they say the river brings new life to her valley. The meadows and forests burst with such vibrant colors that Holi, the festival of spring, steps back quietly and is tempted to steal away. But up in the plateau, in Mandu, where the month of Falgun was once welcomed with the spraying of colors and playing of pranks, the swirling of skirts and clapping of hands, now they say in Mandu, the goddess of spring tiptoes quietly from mahal to mahal, looking for something, for someone, in vain. For the monuments lie in darkness, harrowed by sorrow and stained by pain, the extant tombs of another era. But wait, hark! Is that a snatch of a distant song on the air? Or is it only the moaning of winds in the ravines of Malwa? Who knows? So that is the end of the book, which I would like people to leave with that kind of a mood. That's why I'd written that. And before I end, I'd just like to say one small thing about historical fiction.
Sure.
There's history and there's fiction, but I think there's what's very important is history is just two-dimensional. Without the stories of people who experienced history, the people who have actually gone through these events. So I think if history is giving you dates and days and dates and events, then what is historical fiction giving you? It's giving you the emotions, feelings, and the thoughts of people who lived through those times.
That's true. Historical fiction has a very important place, not just in developing, in developing our understanding of the customs and traditions of that time, preserving them for posterity, but also for increasing people's enticing them to read more of history. After reading Mandu, I'm sure people would be curious about Malwa and the dynasties which ruled Malwa, how its fate was sort of determined, how it was then taken over later and amalgamated in the Mughal Empire. So that's already a big achievement for a writer to write a book that also draws the reader to explore other areas of learning. So before we end, what is the next project?
Oh, a lot of thoughts. I'm still thinking. Nothing decided as yet.
Nothing decided, but I'm sure you'll
probably in the same genre. Probably in the same. So yes,
yeah.
I would write something in the same genre.
So another little corner of India illuminated through another tool. That's wonderful. I really enjoyed our conversation, Malti, and I wish you and the book all success.
Thank you, Anukriti.
I'm sure the readers are going to enjoy it.
Thank you so much. And I enjoyed this talk too.
Likewise. Yeah. So handing it over to Mansi now.
Thank you for joining us this evening as we explored the enchanting world of Mandu. And thank you, Anukriti and Malti, for helping us understand and relive a slice of history. So you can get your copy of this tale of yesteryears from Kitabkhana. The books are available. Mandu is available at Kitabkhana. So DM us to get your copy. Thank you. And thank you once again for the wonderful session.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kitabkhana and Niyogi Books. And thank you very much, Manasi. See you soon. Thanks, Malti.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.